I want to tell you a story about a piece of property that I developed as part of my desire to, share with anybody that may want to develop real estate down the road when finances permit. Some of the things that can happen and do happen, especially when you try to do some things with what's called creative financing. Well, this particular piece of property is one I developed about 25 years ago, or 23 years ago anyway. And it was kind of interesting. One of the things that I'll share later in more detail is how you can research who owns a piece of property, because sometimes you may have an interest in a piece of property that's not for sale. So one way to do that is you look up the tax rolls. Probably a pretty good chance that whoever's paying the taxes owns that piece of land. Not a lot of people pay the taxes for somebody else's property. So I found this piece of property that I really liked, and it was, right next door. There was a 5-acre super Walmart that was clear cutting the trees and getting ready to build that. And the other side of the street was the hospital, the main hospital in town that has, was doing a 30,000 square foot expansion. And I'm right on the corner with about 1.25 acres of commercial land. Well, I couldn't find the owner. I looked up the tax rolls and I had his address, and I kept sending him letters and hoping that he would respond to find out if he was interested in selling the property. And he wasn't. He never responded. Excuse me. But one morning, and I should tell you, I'm kind of a religious kid. So one morning, I knelt in pretty fervent prayer that, Father, if you want me to develop this piece of property, I need to find this owner. The guy's name was Truman Cook. I got out from my knees, got in my truck. By the way, I was broke. I mean, absolutely broke. The truck I just got in had been loaned to me from a guy in my church. It was like an old Ford Courier or something. It wasn't much of a truck, but it was sure appreciated. Anyway, I got in the truck and I drove up to the hospital in the Walmart area and drove past the property again, and just kind of decided, you know what, I guess I'm not going to figure this out. Maybe I can find another piece of property in this area that I could develop. So I drove around the block, and I apologize, I'll try to speed this up, but I drove around the block and I went down this street I'd never been down before, and out of the corner of my eye, I just happened to catch, an old wooden burnt sign on a fence that said Cook. And I stopped the car and I backed up, and just as I did, this little old man and his wife were riding a three-wheeler up this long gravel driveway, and I stopped and waited for him. And I got out and I said, excuse me, by any chance, would you be Truman Cook? And he said, well, yes, I was. He's smoking a stogie. He says, yeah. I said, hey, would you be interested by any chance in selling that piece of land? And he said, sure. Anyway, so two parts to that is that one, I've learned that I never want to be in business again without, having the Lord as my partner, because miracles do happen. I needed a miracle that day. I had just gone through some really tough financial times. I had nothing. I had that borrowed vehicle, had absolutely nothing, just trying to get on my feet. But I knew that I could develop that piece of property. Now there was a couple other challenges that I had to take on. Was, could I get Truman to work with me? Because I had $5,000 from a guy that wanted to be my partner. I didn't have any money still, but he had $5,000 that we could put down on the property if Truman would be willing to carry the property. Anyway, point is, Truman ended up working with us, and it was an amazing thing. And I had another partner that had about $75,000, and my plan was to build 3 medical buildings right across the street from the hospital. And I figured, well, instead of building one big building, we'll build 3 smaller buildings. That gave me the ability to try to get financing in phases somehow. Didn't know, but I didn't care. I had faith that something would work out. So we built the first building, and we're going along building that, and one day Truman pulls up, who clearly was a man who had some money, and he came up and he's standing there smoking his stogie, and he says, "So, tell me, did you ever find financing for those other 2 buildings?" And I said, "No, Truman, I haven't yet." And he kind of had this smirk on his face, and I said, "Truman, is that something you'd be willing to do?" "Well, I talked to my wife. I think we could do that." And I was just floored. The guy came up to me and volunteered to give us the funding to build the other 2 buildings so that we could build the entire project all at one time. Didn't know that was going to happen, of course. Didn't matter. I had a plan. I had a plan to at least build the first one, get a tenant into that, and then start building the next ones as we found financing for them, knowing that once the first one was built, we would build in some equity. And so, but having the opportunity to build them all, it was great. And then next thing you know, I leased the very first building out to the United States government for a VA clinic, and the other 2 were leased in the framing stage when we were building it. And by the time I was done building this development, all 3 buildings were leased and have been 100% leased for over the last 20 years. It's awesome developing real estate. As a builder, building houses, you're just making bread and butter. Anytime I've ever really moved the needle in a big way, it's been by building and developing a piece of real estate and doing a real estate development that has really put you into, making $100,000, $200,000 or more. So I hope that helps kind of wet your whistle a little bit for more about what I want to talk about in the future. By the way, you guys have been absolutely amazing in your comments. Thank you for the support. I appreciate it so much. I thank you for subscribing to the channel. I've got more thoughts on XRP and digital assets. I'll share those in other videos, but this is I just wanted to give you some idea of what's possible. I was completely broke, and in 11 months time from start to finish, I built that medical office complex and had dramatically moved the needle in my life with no money. It's possible, and it can be done. Anyway, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you don't mind, and share this video, retweet it if you don't mind, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.